1. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. Welcome to our December meeting. We are going to do a little Federation business, very brief Federation business before we get to our guest speaker tonight. The first thing we want to do is we need to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. It's on page 2 of the newsletter. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight? It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The next thing to do is improve the minutes from the November 8th Civic Federation meeting. It's on page 19 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the November 8th meeting? Carrie Lamari moved and Joe seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes from the November 8th meeting are approved. The next thing is the treasurer's report. Jerry Garson, can you give us a treasurer's report?
In the last 30 days, we've received $241 in dues. Our current bank balance is $9,503, and we've had income so far this fiscal year that began July 1st of $976 and expenses of $461, giving us a net income for the period of $515. If there are any questions, contact me later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Then, are there any announcements for the general body? Well, let me just make a couple of announcements. One is that our community public forum on the Thrive Montgomery 250 draft plan was very successful last night. Over 160 people registered for the meeting, and we had over 100 active participants. We want to thank the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, the Citizens Coordinating Committee for Friendship Heights and Responsible Growth for Montgomery County, and particularly Ed Aminetti, David Foreman, Carrie Lamari for getting the word out. We appreciated also the participation of County Executive Mark L. Rich. The video from that meeting is on YouTube. You can find it at the Civic Federation Facebook page and ultimately on the Montgomery County Civic Federation webpage, which is montgomerycivic.org. The Civic Federation participated in its first Montgomery County Thanksgiving parade. I want to thank Jerry Garson for driving our vehicle in the parade. That was a good time. Our next general meeting is January 10th, 2022. The agenda is to be determined. Any other announcements for the good of the order? Well, hearing none, let's just jump right to the program. Are you ready, Chief?
Good evening, I'm ready.
Okay, so our guest this evening is a good friend of the Montgomery County Civic Federation and a good friend of mine, Chief Marcus Jones of the Montgomery County Police Department. The chief was sworn in on November 8th in 2019. He was preceded in office by Tom Manger, who is now the chief of the Capitol Police. We believe that the chief has been very generous with his time and his engagement with the community, recently as the 3rd District Commander and now as the Chief of Police. I've asked him to talk generally about policing in Montgomery County. He has been quoted in several news articles over the last couple of weeks, notably about police morale and about guns in the county. And it's very timely for him to be with us this evening to talk about public safety issues confronting the county. So without further ado, Chief Jones.
So thank you, Alan. And as always, again, Alan has been always there and kept me engaged. And thank you to the Federation for having me this evening. and allowing us to talk about crime and talk about several issues surrounding public safety. So I'm very, very honored to have the opportunity to talk about a lot of issues around policing in Montgomery County. And so I'll get right to it because I know there's not only just lots of information, but I'm sure there will be some questions from the organization. So I want to make sure that I give you all ample time to ask those questions. So I think one of the things that have been challenging this year is the fact that we do have an uptick in Montgomery County in violent crimes in the county. We are currently over 30 homicides that we have had thus far this year. And again, when we talk about homicides, we talk about a variety of different incidents that have occurred. And I know that Alan has noted some discussion about that he would want to talk about the one most recently that occurred in downtown Silver Spring, where unfortunately a young man lost his life in a stabbing right in the middle of downtown Silver Spring in the early during the day. But again, we have a variety of whether we have incidents that are domestic related. We have had incidents that are acquaintance related. And overall, we have been able to solve many of the crimes involving homicides, but there are some unsolved crimes that have involved some incidents that have involved shootings. And we're continuing to work those investigations, and we're not quite sure of what the motive has been for those incidents to this point. And when we look at it from an overall sense, but I will tell you our homicide detectives continuously work those investigations in order to try to do their very best to gain leads and to also work with the evidence that's presented in order to best make cases possible. Also, when we look at overall, our robberies are slightly on the uptick this year. Last year during COVID, robberies, of course, went down, not only from our commercial establishments, but also from those street robberies of violent robberies of our citizens. But those incidents have been on the rise, and those include carjackings that we have had in the county as well. That has been not only a concern here in Montgomery County, particularly in the Silver Spring and the Wheaton areas where the vast majority of those incidents have occurred, but we have had them in other parts of the county as well. But they are a regional problem. We have worked with, and I'll talk a little bit about the task force that we put together in order to work with our other partners, Metropolitan Police Department, Prince George's County Police Department, as well as our federal partners in the FBI, as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office, to actually work to try to combat that particular issue as well. And then when we look at our aggravated assaults are categorized as your most heinous types of assaults. These are your shootings, your stabbings, or an actual physical assault that is extremely up as well this year. And then it will go to, again, when I speak about gun violence and my concern about where we are in gun violence in during this year, it has been of a major concern, not only of the amount of guns that we have been able to recover, but that has also been the amounts of shootings and the volume of the shots fired in some of these incidents that give me some serious concerns about safety in our community. And again, these are your more violent type of crimes. Auto thefts are also up in the county, unfortunately, and that is a pattern again that is regional wide. It can also be connected to our theft from autos that we have, which again is the #1 crime in Montgomery County. It is when individuals are actually going and actually trying to break into cars that are either unlocked or there are items that are of interest to those who are actually committing these offenses. But we find often that, and way too often, that sometimes our community members will actually leave their car doors unlocked, feeling safe, particularly at home. And these individuals will actually just prey on particular neighborhoods looking for a variety of different items that they can figure out a ways to sell it in some way, form, or matter on the black market, or on other different types of social media platforms that they can actually sell these products, and actually in order to try to actually to make money off of them in more ways than in one. So these are, again, these are the primary things when we look at crime and what are those issues that are occurring in our county. And as we talk about, again, the concern about the firearms that we've been recovering, and I spoke to the Public Safety Committee with the Montgomery County Council to express my concerns about, and over the course of my 36-year career, I have not seen the amount of guns that we have been recovering in our community ever during the course of my career. And this is very troubling that we've had incidents that have, again, we're finding guns often, and these are weapons that are illegally possessed. We're also, one of the things that the Maryland State Legislature actually put into place a few years ago was the Extreme Risk Protection Order that allows us to seize weapons in the event of an individual who may be going through a mental health crisis, and has made threats to do harms not only to themselves, but may be looking to do harms to others. And the courts have given us the ability to seize weapons in that way. And that has added to the amount of weapons that we've actually recovered along the way. But again, we are still recovering weapons from individuals who are prohibited from possessing these weapons, or they are possessing them illegally by transporting them either in their vehicles or on their persons. So that is something of, again, that we are paying close attention to. And we're also, again, ghost guns. As individuals know that these are the types of weapons that are actually bought through over the internet. It is basically an easier way to actually purchase a weapon which is not traceable by the sense that it has no serial number. It can be bought, again, off the internet. We have had cases that have involved juveniles even possessing these ghost guns, that they are getting their hands on them through one way or another of either pretending as if they're an adult when they are purchasing these weapons, or they are buying them off of the street or the black market, you might say, in a way from an adult that allows them to possess this. In fact, in one case that we had involving a homicide earlier this year in the Germantown area, the 14-year-old who is charged in that case actually had a ghost gun committing that offense. And then that was very disturbing in its own right. So again, understanding that these guns do have the ability to get into the wrong hands, and they are being utilized in some of these crimes, that heinous crimes that are occurring, are shootings. And as we talk about the shootings that have occurred, again, in all parts of the county, Silver Spring is not the only area in which we've had shootings occurring, some where individuals have been struck, but we've also had a number of shootings where individuals have not been struck. We just had one, if you may have been listening to the news just today, we had a shooting late last night, earlier this morning, about 2:15 in downtown Silver Spring, where we had two groups of individuals who basically, we don't know exactly why. We don't know if they had some disagreement amongst the two groups, but clearly the way they wanted to settle whatever disagreement they were having, they decided to try to settle it in a way of basically firing weapons, handguns at each other, firing bullets. And in reality, the good news was that no one was struck, no individual. The unfortunate thing was, it caused chaos in downtown Silver Spring, as we had officers who were actually nearby, who were actually involved in just kind of clearing out a crowd from one of the night spots in downtown Silver Spring, further south on Georgia Avenue, but yet we're able to hear the shots being fired. By the time our officers got to the scene, these individuals actually had fled the area. So again, as I noted, when we go back and we look at some of the incidents that happened, we have one at Georgia Avenue and Eastern Avenue that happened earlier this year, where we probably had, I believe the total count was somewhere in about 45 rounds were fired with the shootout, where actually two individuals actually were struck by the gunfire, but were not killed. That, we believe, was an incident that came out of the District of Columbia. And actually, because there really are no borders when individuals are involved in some of these activities, they just, when they encounter each other, and they determine that they think it's safe to do so, they are going to then do the incidents in which they've had. And overall, when we look at these types of shootings, and we've had, again, shootings that have occurred in Up County in Germantown, to be quite frank, and other areas in the county where we've had 40 to 50 rounds. In certain areas, we've had 30 rounds fired. And we've actually captured some of these incidents on from a resident's Ring camera. Those are disturbing to know that we have young people, these individuals who are involved in this type of behavior, utilizing violence in order to try to settle these disagreements, however that is. So there's a lot more to come. We're doing a lot of work with our friends at the ATF in order to be able to try to identify the types of weapons. And sometimes it has the forensics that we're able to actually identify the guns that are actually occurring in more than just one incident that's occurring, not only in our county, but we've also been able to even identify guns that have been used in other crimes in other jurisdictions, such as the District of Columbia or Prince George's County, to be frank. So we are, again, working with our other law enforcement partners in order to help to try to bring some of these cases to closure when we can. And an example of that is really when we talk about the carjacking task force, where over the past year plus, we were able to put together a group of investigators and really kind of start to identify the different groups, some who were actually involved in these multiple incidents of carjackings that occurred in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, but that Montgomery County, again, we were not hands off. We were actually in the midst of some of these incidents that were occurring in downtown Silver Spring, as an example. There were some that were occurring in other parts of the county, as well as, like as I noted earlier, Wheaton. But again, looking for opportunities of escape, that they could get easy access onto our to major roadways or the interstate. And what we found in majority of these cases, what we discovered was the fact that these individuals, the majority of the individuals involved that we have arrested and have found involved in these carjackings are not from Montgomery County. We found that there was a group of individuals that were from the southeastern part of the District of Columbia, that we were finding these vehicles that were carjacked. There was we were baffled at what was the actual motive in many of these incidents, due to the fact that it did not seem to be that it was a crime of simply of a crime to actually from a financial standpoint, that would benefit individuals, that they were actually selling cars on a legal market or selling them for parts. or taking parts off of them. They were merely simply just going around carjacking cars as if it was a sport, but doing violence as a result of it, whether they were possessing handguns or knives, or whether they were physically assaulting women at gas stations, or individuals at ATM machines, or just whenever there was an opportunity. That's what we began to see this trend. So in some regards, we were able to have at least about 40% closure in most of these in the carjacking cases, because we were able to tie individuals to multiple cases of carjackings that occurred in the county. And then again, some of those cases actually cross jurisdictional lines, and we're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland, as well as the District of Columbia, to really go after prosecution on many of these individuals that particularly handle some of the multiple and more violent type of cases that we have been seeing. So those are significant issues. Again, as we look at the crime in downtown Silver Spring, for example, I have been working with Commander Dave McBain, who has put together a task force, a group of officers who have been concentrating on incidents that have been occurring in downtown. We've been doing this since probably like the beginning of October, late September. And we are beginning to see some fruit of that labor. But that still becomes a challenge, because there is a significant amount of issues that have been occurring. We are really kind of looking at statistical data from our crime analysts to kind of see when we see the vast majority of these incidents that have been occurring. But we have been fortunate enough to make arrests of individuals who have been involved in robberies or attempt robberies. We have been able to arrest individuals that are in possession of illegal handguns because of the activities that they have been seen in and around downtown Silver Spring. And we've also had some success in dealing with some of the individuals who are actually selling marijuana. And again, that becomes a little bit of a challenge for us, even though the possession of marijuana has been decriminalized. But the reality is there is violence that is attached to it, unfortunately, in some circumstances, to include the most recent stabbing that we had in downtown Silver Spring. It was as a result of a drug deal that had gone bad. And it was centered around marijuana. So that, again, gives us really concerns about how that we best put forth our resources and strategies in working with the state's attorney's office in order to make sure that we don't have the repeat behaviors of these individuals that are involved. So with all of that being said and done, and I know that, again, we wanted to address some of the other issues centered around the police department that I have spoken about a lot to the council, a lot to the county executive, as well as to others within the community about police morale. Where do I feel our department is? I have said this multiple times, and I repeat it again today. Is that one of my greatest leadership challenges is to maintain a high morale for our police officers who work very hard, in my opinion, in order to help to make this a safe community. I know I've spoken a lot about the crimes that have happened in our communities, but again, when just as I noted that, for example, I don't think I gave the stat, but we've had 57 carjackings in Montgomery County. I believe Prince George's noted a statistic just last week that they had 36 carjackings in 1 week. And so it goes to show you that as much as we know that we have crimes that we're not used to, I'd put it that way, but overall, I believe that we're still a very safe community overall. And I think our officers work very hard to try to maintain that stability all throughout the county and in more ways than one. But in the midst of that, and a lot of discussion about police reform, and I will preface this by stating that I think a lot of officers that I've spoken to over the course of the last 2 years, particularly over the last year, will tell me often that they fully support police reform in all aspects. But they feel as if there's been an opportunity by some in the county to basically demean and not support what they do on a daily basis. And they don't feel supported, to be quite frankly. They feel as if that there's a mission by some to be more inclined to want to put police officers in jail than they do to support police officers in doing their jobs. And again, I can't be more frank than that, than just share with the way police officers feel. And so we have a discussion, and I've gone around during all of the in-service training. I've tried to make the majority of the in-service training hours that I have a conversation with our police officers, and to give them my support, but to also share with them many times that I hear from the communities that do support them. They don't necessarily have the loudspeaker, but there are a large amount of our community that I call the silent majority that does support our police officers. And I think anyone who's from the human race, that we all are, that we have feelings about, and we want to feel as if we are needed in the jobs in which we do every day, particularly when we sacrifice and we work, odd hours. We are away from our families on holidays, and all of the like, and the commitment and hard work and dedication it takes to become a police officer. Those are challenges, and those are significant challenges. And what has that led to? And that's a discussion that I really want to have, is to make sure people understand that when we look at our challenges, we look at significant things such as making sure that we not only keep the officers' morale up, but that they want to remain with our police department and to work for our community. And right now, currently, we talk about recruitment challenges. We talk about retention challenges. And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that's very important for everyone to really to have an understanding about. From a standpoint of retention, we look at our departments. Our department has several. We do have a 25-year retirement program that we have had for many years. But we also have some incentive programs in the retirement program, that what we call a deferred retirement program, otherwise known as the drop. And the drop allows officers to actually to retire, but to work 3 additional years while investing their retirement, but to still maintain the same jobs that they had. And it's a very good program that is utilized by much of public safety all across the county, as well as the country. But I would also note that, again, the officers can go into the program at 25 years. They can go into the program at 30 years, or all the way up beyond their 30 years if they so desire. It just individuals make up they make their own personal decisions. One of the statistics that I want to make sure that when we're looking at moving this department forward and maintaining and even surpassing maybe the numbers of officers that I foresee as really will be needed, looking at the growth of the county and where we are in our communities. Currently, we are about 50 officers below our strength right now. And that's partly because we have officers that are retiring at not so much an early rate, but they may be going earlier than we anticipated. And currently we do have 20%. And I want to make sure this statistic is very clear. We have 20% of our officers who are currently today eligible to retire. That is a high number for any agency to really understand, really having to be on the forefront to make sure that you continue to stay up with your hiring processes and getting the numbers of individuals to be able to replace those officers when they make the final decision to retire. So with that being the case, it is important for us to understand that we really have to move forward with trying to recruit good officers, And then again, that is something that has always been near and dear to my heart, that you have to hire the right people. Over the past, currently we have 13 recruits that are in our recruit class. Last academy class, we had 14, partly because that was a budget cut that we made a decision to do that. But with that, all of that being said, what I will tell you is that Montgomery County is not alone in the struggle of trying to hire new officers. This is a national problem. I have been talking to other chiefs across the country, talking about the new challenges that we all have, because again, making sure that we are hiring not only the right people, but we also want to make sure that we are bringing people into the profession who are ready to actually take the task of being a police officer, and who again is going to be again accountable, and that is willing to work in our community in a way that we think will be very effective. And with that being said, we're working on some additional strategies. We're working on some strategies that will focus around our cadet program in order to strengthen that. Our cadet program is really looking at really bringing in homegrown talent that are from Montgomery County, are attending Montgomery College as an example, trying to develop some additional programs with Montgomery College, maybe from a scholarship perspective in order to help. Our cadet program, we actually pay them a part-time salary. They actually earn benefits while they're attending college. As you all may know, it does require 60 college credits as a minimum to join Montgomery County Police. So when our cadet program starts, they have 2 years as they are continuing in college in order to actually work with the police department, get acclimated to the culture of the police department. And it is our hope when those individuals graduate from college, then we see that they will then join Montgomery County Police. We've been doing this program right now, I want to say, for about 5 years, and we have had success. We've had success in getting new police officers out of this program. We've gotten a vast majority of diversity out of this program, and I'm finding it to be very successful. And what I'm looking at is maybe looking at potentially in next fiscal year to actually grow the cadet program to more cadets, as we have about 14 in the current group now. But I want to look at possibly doubling that as we again look at what our challenges are in recruitment. We do a vast majority of different things as we go through recruitment. When we actually are going up and down the East Coast, we're doing job fairs. We do, where we do particularly where we're focusing on women, we're focusing on minorities, but our recruiters are actually, and there have been challenges, particularly when we look at what's been happening last year in our COVID, as we began through our COVID pandemic, how, again, there are significant challenges in actually the hiring of police officers as we move forward. And again, you look at the other challenges, whether it's what we went through with the George Floyd incident across the country. And again, how that has impacted, again, the scope of law enforcement and how individuals are now having to be under the microscope and how that is actually being played out. And so even though we have that, those challenges, I will still say that there are still people who are enthusiastic about the service of working as a police officer. And that is pleasing to see that we still have people that are excited about wanting to be the police. Again, we will still have to look at where our numbers are. In years past, I will tell you, generally on average, we would have over 1,000 applicants for any police academy. Now those numbers have significantly dropped to somewhere around the number of about 400 over the last couple of academy class. So it shows you where we have those significant challenges. So I'll end here because I see that there are lots of questions, but what I will say is, from a standpoint of what was asked of me, is what can residents do in this regard? Well, I say this to everybody who I talk to. we're all recruiters in our own right. And when we identify individuals that we believe would make good police officers, I encourage our residents to highly encourage those individuals to join our force. But I also would say this, I think, again, what's significant is, again, to again express when you have the ability to talk to a police officer or be before police officers, to actually speak to them about your support, if that is which way you actually do support officers. I think that's what they need to hear, more than just coming from the chief. Even though I'm going to, again, give them my support because I understand exactly how they feel. But I would say, from the community's aspect, I would just encourage everyone to be positive. We're all partners in this. My police officers want a safe community as much as everyone else. They want to be able to solve crimes, to address any public safety issues to the best of their ability. They just feel as if they want to make sure that they are not treated less than when they are doing their job. So with that, I will pause and I'll turn it back over to Alan. And Alan and I'll be more than happy to answer questions as you see fit.
Thank you so much, Chief Jones. That was a brilliant summary of what's going on in the county. We really appreciate it. Want to acknowledge our county executive has joined the call. We also have a county council member, Tom Hooker, I believe, is still on the call. Just wanted to alert you, as is Shamari Stone from Channel 4, a good friend of Silver Spring. What we're going to do for Q&A, we're going to ask you to use the raise hand function. You can find that at the bottom of your screen under the reactions button, and you can see a little button there. It says raise hand. We've got 3 questions. We're going to start with Carrie Lamari. I'm going to ask, there are a lot of people have questions this evening. We're ask everybody to keep their questions short and no speeches because we don't have enough time. Carrie Lamari, you're recognized.
I'll try to be short, Alan. It's difficult on this topic. Chief Jones, it's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Mr. Lamari.
All right, I've talked to numerous police officers that are friends of mine that are retired. They're on my Facebook page, and yeah, we've broached the subject of how demoralized the department is, or the officers feel, and it almost appears as though people get offended when you talk nice about the police these days, which troubles me. But what I was told by my friends who are police officers, and I'd like you to take it a little further if you don't mind. It's a little uncomfortable, I'm sure, but it is though the police today are afraid to really be as aggressive, not aggressive, but to get out there and be proactive on their job, because they're afraid that the public will have a negative perception of them. And if that's the case, things have gone too far. And I'd like you to talk about that, because that's troubling me, you know?
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Lamar. And I think there are some, I could give an example for it real quick. We had, in fact, Council President Albanaz was actually doing a ride along with one of my midnight duty commanders when Councilman Albanaz observed a vehicle, as well as the duty commander, actually run a red light. And the officer made the traffic stop. And while the officer was on the traffic stop talking to the violator, who was completely cooperative and who noted that she apologized, she had run the red light, she was late for an event, I believe it was the story. But during the midst of the traffic stop, as the officer was engaging with the violator, another vehicle stopped by and just began harassing the officer, people in the vehicle, yelling at them, telling them, they had better things to do, and stop harassing people along the way. So what you find is that even when the officers are doing their jobs, they are being verbally harassed at times by individuals. And that is what, again, can become very demoralizing as you are trying to just do what you think is the right thing to do in public safety. So with that being said, that is another example where, really it takes tough skin. We tell our officers that we understand that, again, sometimes that is what happens in our society, but it has become a trend, I should say, that officers are hearing more of this, really taking verbal abuse from individuals at times when I think it's completely unnecessary. So those are some of the struggles that we actually do encounter.
Well, for me, I want to say thank you to you for your service and for the service of all the policemen, because I actually have had very good experiences, maybe one bad one, but the majority, I mean, they're really good gentlemen. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I'll let our folks know. Thank you, Mr. Lamari.
Thank you, Carrie. Next question, Shamari Stone.
Hi, Chief. Thank you for your time. You had mentioned, how's it going? Mentioned about the increase in robberies, carjackings, assaults. I've reported on a couple incidents recently in downtown Silver Spring in regards to the woman who was walking near downtown Silver Spring and was robbed at knife point. Then you also had the fatal stabbing that you had described was essentially, according to police, a drug deal. What can be done to bring down the violent crime that we're seeing in downtown Silver Spring?
Yeah, that's a great question, Shamari. And it is, again, it's a challenge for us. I think for us, we have looked at some strategies in order to try to figure out how to have more of a higher visibility presence in downtown Silver Spring, and looking at new strategies. I think, again, we focused a lot on the evening hours, particularly in the latter part of the week into the weekends, where we're having larger amounts of people in downtown Silver Spring, whether it's shopping or whether individuals are visiting restaurants or whatever the like. I mean, downtown Silver Spring has been a very, very busy corridor and really has grown due to the population, as well as due to the amount of restaurants and social life that's there. And so what we're trying to do is really to try to put some focus on the visibility of our officers, to have that presence to deter any of that activity. We've seen that work, but I need for it to work on a larger scale. I needed to work more broader out from a time frame that allows our officers to have more officers engaged in doing other things. And that's some of the strategies that we'll be working on, because at the end of the day, and it's going to be also, I would say, because I always say this, that we should not, though it is our primary responsibility of public safety, but we also like to work in partnership with with the community, with our business owners, with our residents who live in downtown Silver Spring. And when they see things that they feel like the activity, something is suspicious, we ask them to please report that, because sometimes we're finding that things are happening and sometimes people aren't calling. And it really puts us a little bit behind the eight ball, you might say, of trying to kind of catch up with an investigation. So we just want to make sure that we understand that we're partners. We're working really actively with the Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce, with the businesses downtown, but we're going to expand that. So there's going to be more talk about how to come up with new strategies in order to address that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shamari. Thank you, Chief. We're going to take a couple of questions. So people have raised their hands. Next person in the queue is Emmanuel. Would you unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Chief, thank you so very much for your service and for your leadership. I joined the Citizens Academy to honor my friend, my brother, Officer Noah Leota. Mm-hmm. And I have seen the great thing of our county police department. I come from very far. I come from like a nation that doesn't have that kind of quality. And then when I came here, I say I was so proud. So my question here for you, Chief, is what kind of help do you get from our council members? Because I wasn't happy the approach that triggered all this kind of not trusting our police force, because some of them, they just put out some sort of like negative information, and now we are here that people are not trusting our police officers. So I'm so sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, but so what kind of help do you get? That's what I want to know, because as a citizen, I want to understand like where we can work in order to make this better in the future.
Right.
And thank you so much again.
So thank you, Emmanuel. And so, you know, one of the things, Emmanuel, that's important, even though that I know that, you know, council members represent their constituents, but they also, they provide, not only do they make legislation, but they also provide financial assistance or resources through the budget for policing. The Public Safety Committee that's headed up by Council Member Sidney Katz, he's the chair, and Council Member Tom Hucker and Council President Gabe Albornoz actually sit on that committee. And they often ask us, you know, again, what are the needs of our department? What are those things that are needed in order to make our jobs, you know, more effective and to make the community more safe? And so that's a partnership that we must have, and that in order for us to really, again, to build upon trust, and again, you know, I think we all have to build upon trust, but we have to have an open dialogue. And so one of the things I think that's important with the council members is that we do have an open dialogue with them, that they, you know, that if there's an issue, that it just not when a problem arises, but we should be having these conversations throughout and maintaining those conversations. I think we can build some of us we can actually build upon that. That could be better. But I will say that overall, you know, again, that is something that our police officers pay attention to, is exactly what support our politicians are providing for us. And that's something, again, that's important for our politicians to understand, is that our officers are paying attention to the level of support that they feel as if they get. And that's, again, those are the challenges. But I will tell you that, again, trust is built upon, again, relationships. And we do have relationships with our county council members, which I hope continues as we move forward, because we're going to still have some significant challenges. And we do have significant challenges that we have to work through. So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much for your service. I'm so proud of all of you, what you guys doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The next person, Brian.
Hey, Chief Jones, thank you for all that tonight. I appreciate that. It's good to see you again. I apologize in advance if I missed. I may have missed it. I appreciate you touching on the recruitment efforts. Can you talk a little bit about the number of vacancies in 3D? I know that's been an issue going back to when you were commander of 3D. And I'm curious if if 3D still has the highest number of vacancies of the police districts in the county, and some of the things you're doing to address that.
Yeah, right now, Brian, I think we're probably 3D is probably in a race with the 4th district on the largest numbers of vacancies. Those are our 2 busiest police districts in the county. But right now, I would probably say that we're probably down, when we look at the numbers, somewhere about maybe 20 positions in the 3rd district, and from where we've been in years past. And again, understand we had a larger complement right before I took over as chief of police than we currently have today. And when you look at the lower number of complements, I think we have 25 less positions than I had that are authorized by the department. I think at this point I'm around 1279, but we're about 50 positions overall for the entire police department below. What happens is, again, this is what's very unique to our department, but, you know, patrol is the sort of the, you know, when an officer graduates from the police academy, that's patrol is their first assignment. We actually try to put the where we have the largest numbers of vacancies in order to fill those voids. But in all of our districts, we have some voids that we want to make sure that we have the appropriate number of staffing in order to address that. And if there's ways that we need to manipulate or change our staffing plans in order to make sure that we have the proper number of officers in each district, then that's what we do. We have not had to have to do that as of yet, because we're well above our minimum staffing for each of our shifts. And that's one of the main things we have to focus on, to make sure we have the minimum number of officers that we believe it's required in order to handle 911 and non-emergency calls for our district. So that is, again, the patrol division is the backbone. And then when you look at our detective bureaus, in our investigative services bureau, our other support bureaus, such as our field services. For example, we just went to centralized traffic division to have traffic enforcement throughout the entire county under one umbrella. But we have less traffic officers today than we had originally because of the centralized plan, but we actually provided the districts with some additional support to handle complaints within their districts. So as we continue to move on, the numbers have dwindled down again for each of the districts. I think it's probably more highlighted in districts like the 3rd district and the 4th district, because they are the busiest districts. But again, we look at, what's the impact across the board for each of the districts. And that's how the commanders work with their assistant chiefs as well as myself in order to make sure that those numbers that we are providing, the amount of service that's necessary for each district. So we'll continue to monitor that throughout. It's our hope that we'll get those numbers back up as we begin to recruit more in the next year or so.
I've asked Jackie Bocco of the Civic Federation Executive Committee to moderate some of the questions. Jackie?
Hi, we were going to start calling on the, or reading you the questions from the chat, but since the 3 questions I was going to ask you, the people have raised their hands, we're going to let them speak for themselves. So Naima Jefferson, if you'd like to unmute.
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity and opening this up to the public. I'm a district resident and live 1 street away from the Montgomery County line near Georgia and Eastern. I'd put a question in the chat about the drag racing that's occurring. It comes down into the district. We hear it. But my other question is really, what coordination can occur between the council member's office and the Montgomery County Police Department with the Ward 4 council member and the DC Police Department regarding the businesses that are closed down in the downtown Silver Spring area that move right across the line and are what we consider bad actors. The vast majority of the businesses that we have in our community along the Georgia Avenue Strip have actually relocated from just on the other side of the line and have caused lots of problems for our community. And we understand that when they were located in Montgomery County, that they had either been closed down by the liquor board or either the police department there, and simply just brought their clientele and their behavior and business practices our direction. Is there some type of, interagency or interjurisdictional legislation that can be passed so that when those instances happen, just across the line, that people aren't using, I guess, legislative or regulatory arbitrage in order to bring their problems to the district?
Yeah, I will say, there's a dialogue. I don't know so much from the regulatory of these types of businesses that we're involved in. I will say we are not the sort of the enforcement arm of liquor laws here in Montgomery County, as our alcohol beverage service monitors a lot of those the regulations. And Montgomery County does have very strict liquor laws as it pertains to businesses functioning within the county. We will work with them when there are issues of public safety that are connected to those businesses. I will say I have a very good working relationship with Chief Conti from Metropolitan, and many of my assistant chiefs we have really good working relationships to talk about issues surrounding public safety. I was not aware that there were, some of these businesses that were in Silver Spring who have been closed down that actually have reopened in the District of Columbia. I am not familiar with the district's regulatory practices as it relates to businesses. We are more than happy to share information. We have always been open to information sharing when we have had issues of problems of individuals that may go into another jurisdiction, creating public safety issues that have come from our jurisdictions. I would, if there's a need for us to have that conversation and that we have information to share, I am more than happy to have my staff share that with the District of Columbia. I don't know what's the impact of anything that they have legislatively or regulatory that would allow them to utilize that. But again, we're always willing to work with them.
Okay. Bailey Condry.
Chief Jones, Bailey Condry, I thank you and your officers for their service.
Thank you, sir.
Are the folks, going back to the increasing numbers of weapons that you're recovering, the folks that are being dispossessed of these weapons, are they giving you any insights into whether there are larger organizations funneling these weapons to dealers to make it more easy for people to get them?
So I think there's a variety of different ways that I think of these illegal weapons are actually getting onto our streets. And I think it's not as simple as much as we would want it to be. We do believe that there are organizations of people that are involved in the illegal sales of weapons on our streets that will basically create a black market. And those weapons are actually sometimes purchased through from gun dealers in other states and then brought to our area. We have found that there have been individuals from states such as Tennessee or Virginia that individuals have the ability to go to gun shows and actually buy weapons and then resell them. Some of that, when we find the ability to trace and work backwards, we do that. In order to find whose weapon is responsible. We also find that weapons are actually stolen in burglaries, residential burglaries, not just here in Montgomery County, but all up and down the East Coast and other parts of the country, that we find weapons that are via their serial number have been reported stolen out of a residential burglary. We find them from North Carolina, Georgia, all sorts of places. So there are significant challenges when we are actually trying to, we do have a gun unit that actually, that is their firearms investigation unit. That is their primary responsibility to do in gun investigations and look for these organizations that might be involved in illegal sales of weapons. But again, we're finding individuals who are possessing the weapons, which is even more challenging. And much of what they will tell us is the reason why they have a weapon is because they believe that everybody else has a weapon. So they feel like they have to protect themselves when they're in the streets because they think that everyone else has an illegal weapon. So that is what I find to be most disturbing, particularly amongst many of our young people who have that mindset. Which means that creates a lot of problems for a safe community.
Thank you.
Ira Unger, if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah, hi, thanks for coming. I wanted to ask you if you have a complaint with, if you have a complaint with your local police district, what's the what do you recommend as procedure to raise the issue? And you haven't gotten a response that you're satisfied with from the district. Should you go to the county council, or is there another place in the police department where you should go?
So there's, if you have a complaint within your district and you feel as if you're not satisfied, you are more than welcome to actually complain to the bureau chief of the actual officer that you're involved in a complaint with, whatever that particular district. We track all of our complaints. All of our complaints go through our internal affairs division. Depending upon the severity of the complaint, we make a decision on whether it is what we call an intake or it is a formal investigation if it is a more serious violation of our policies. If it's an intake, it may be investigated by the officer supervisor in order to address that. So what I would tell you is that if you don't feel satisfied and you want a further explanation, you can, of course, reach out to the bureau chief and have that discussion about, you know, why you feel as if that you did not get a fair review of this particular case. And then the bureau chief can help you with that. And again, I oversee the bureau chiefs, and if there's something more significant, that could be brought to my attention as well.
You're still muted, Ira. If you're responding, Ira, you're muted.
Is the district commander the same as the bureau chief, or is that another position?
No, the district commander oversees the district. He or she is a captain. The bureau chief is an assistant chief. So if it is a district, if it is a police district, then it will fall under our patrol services chief, who is assistant chief Willie Parker Lone. He oversees all of the police districts.
Okay, and also one other question. Could you talk about any de-escalation training that the department's offering its officers?
Sure. So we have been doing de-escalation training for quite some time. But again, we always looking to explore additional de-escalation training. Currently, we have just been training on the ICAT model that was presented by the Police Executive Research Forum in order to better de-escalate in many of our mental health situations. So again, we utilize these in many different facets of our training, not only in our recruit school training, but also for our in-service training, which all of our officers are required to actually conduct in-service training. And we're really doing it with a hands-on approach and having our officers walk through these incidents and to really debrief them on their actions once they actually go through the training. So again, this is something that's very important. We've seen success in many cases of de-escalation. So we just continue to try to work on always improving in that field.
Thank you.
Okay, Sharon Campbell.
That was quick, thank you. I was just wondering, I just a minute ago started looking on the Montgomery County website to see what's there for the police department. And I'm wondering if there's relatively easy ways to get information. What I found so far is what's on most sites, not just the Montgomery County Police Department, but a lot of verbiage and what is helpful to people is images or charts and graphs and we call it organizational charts and that sort of thing. Have I just not found them yet?
Yeah, the organizational chart is on our website, and there also, I would also encourage you to look at each year we put out our annual report that highlights a variety of different aspects of our police department with statistics in the annual report. We also report out on our use of forces throughout the year, as well as our pursuits. And so we in internal affairs also produces a report. So those reports are available on our website. Again, we usually annually publish them around late February, March. Those are our timelines that we try to abide by. And I always encourage people to make sure that that information is made is readily available for our folks to read. And if you have questions, you can of course email me when you choose my picture, you can see the email address to actually email my office, and we can respond in any questions that you may have.
Oh, okay, that's good to know. I was also in that same regard was wondering about citizens wanting to support the police, work with the police. You know, there used to be neighborhood watch and that sort of thing. So is there an easy way for people to find out how they can do those things?
Yeah, so what I always encourage individuals to do is first, there's a location on the website. If you don't know which police district you may reside in, you can actually put your address in and it will provide you with that information. And then what I would ask you to do is to go to that particular district on our website and find the district commander. And you can again click on the district commander and actually directly email the district commander, who has a community services officer assigned to each of the districts, where we actually communicate with our communities to talk about neighborhood watch programs and other types of programs that we offer within our department as well for those particular police districts. So that's a really good way to, I think, in order to best understand who your district commander are, to be able to always address any public safety need that you have in your community, in order to communicate with them and to share your thoughts.
Okay, Lynn Bales.
Hello. Thank you for coming out, Chief. We miss you in 3D.
I miss you all.
I was wondering, after the car rally downtown, with downtown pretty much paralyzed with traffic, and especially when the cars were spinning around at the corner of Fenton and Ellsworth, I wonder if since then, have we learned any lessons from that? Do we have new approaches in mind should this kind of thing happen again in the future?
Sure, absolutely, Lynn. That was a very unique incident. What most people don't realize is that incident actually started up in off of Cherry Hill Road at the Target store right on the Prince George's County line. We initially had information about it. We sent officers there to address it. The individuals tried to go, we notified Prince George's County that they may be moving their way, and they were met there, and they decided to go to White Oak. They created some confusion, some madness in White Oak, and then they proceeded to actually head towards downtown Silver Spring. In the midst of that, some of our officers had to spin off of that because we didn't know exactly where they were going or what they were getting ready to do. There was an accident on the Beltway where we were kind of helping Maryland State Police with the accident. Some of our staff got tied up with another accident. And then, of course, they go into downtown Silver Spring, and they did what you probably all have observed to some degree. We've been talking to a lot of our partners in the Washington metropolitan area. In fact, I have a meeting on this week with chiefs in the Washington metropolitan area to talk about strategies. We have actually, because of that, our lessons learned, we've actually beefed up our patrols to address this. We did it this past weekend. We actually had a group of officers who were dedicated to looking around to find some of these car meetups. We found a smaller one where we actually conducted some enforcement efforts. I've got another group of officers who are prepared to be ready this weekend in case we find that they actually come to Montgomery County, or if they, in fact, go to some other neighboring county, that we're ready to be able to respond to that. So we are coming up with new strategies in order to deal with that. Again, it's very challenging. There was a car rally actually in Prince George's County at University in Delphi last weekend where they did not last weekend, 2 weekends ago, where they did exactly the same thing that they did in downtown Silver Spring. But they did not come to Montgomery County on that particular night. But in that one, I think they had well over 200 cars that were involved in that particular rally. That shows you the magnitude that we're dealing with in law enforcement to address this. So we're partnering again with Maryland State Police, with our local agencies here in the county, as well as Prince George's County, Howard County, because they're moving from one jurisdictions to another. Many of these individuals are from as far away north as New Jersey. And they're getting on social media to actually conduct these meets. So we're trying to be, to the best of our ability, to be 1 or 2 steps ahead of them. But again, there's a large amount of people that we'll have to address. But we feel like if we come up with these new strategies, maybe we can deter them from ever coming back to Montgomery County. We'll see.
And if this were to happen again in, say, downtown Silver Spring, would the group down there be dealt with any differently now?
Yes. Yeah, we're coming up with new strategies in order to be able to deal with the group, particularly those individuals who are the actors who are actually doing all the spin outs. We're going to be trying to focus more on those who are violating traffic laws and causing these types of disturbances. And we're just trying to find safe ways to actually get in to address that, but they will be dealt with differently. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I know it was hard.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, thank you.
Joe, before I call on you, I want to ask a question from the chat. It's been on the chat for a while. This is from, I think it's Eileen Finnegan. She doesn't have a mic tonight. She wants to know, is there any plan to increase the communication directly to the public? And she says, with the end of local newspapers and reduced coverage in the Washington Post, many only get headline police news, and community service officers only push out event flyers. Folks would appreciate more information to partner with the police department. So, it says right now in the virtual world, it's up to groups to organize into forums like this or Safe Silver Spring versus the police department organizing something for anybody in the public realm.
Sure. So thanks to Eileen for that. And Eileen's always been a great partner of ours and always is. I know how concerned she's always been about information. One of the things that I've been trying to really work on is strategy-wise, and we're still in the infancy stages of it, but it's the growth of our public information office to be able to provide more detailed information out and find more strategies of communication to our communities, whether it's next door or we're trying to find some other application that I think that will be easy for the public to utilize in order to share information. So that office, I just hired a new public information officer who is a civilian. I've changed the strategy of that particular office, our focus, and really to have it led by a civilian who has experience in communications. And so now we've gotten that piece done, but now it's time for us to provide extra personnel to support that division in order to be able to provide that information to the community in a timely manner. And that's important to me, that we make sure that it's provided in a timely manner.
Okay, I'm going to call on Joe Awkward, and I think we're probably just going to have one more question after you. So go ahead, Joe.
Hey, good evening, Chief Jones.
Good evening, Joe.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great presentation, and I truly agree with you that we have a very strong silent majority that is very much in support of the police department. I think it's extremely important. I guess the question I have is, in terms of our homicides and aggravated assaults in the counties, if you had to speculate how much of those would be tied into drug-related activity and potential gang activity in the county, just be curious about that, because sometimes with the gang-related and drug activity, individuals are probably disposed to doing much more dangerous or risky behavior. But I was just curious if you felt there were some correlations in there with the homicides and aggravated assaults with other gangs or individuals under the influence of drugs or in search of drugs.
Right. So great question, Joe. I will tell you, when we look at some of our homicides, one of those are the very questions that we actually really look at in many cases, particularly if it's not a domestic related incident or it's not an acquaintance known incident, that we look at, again, what's the motive. And we do know that there are cases that do involve that's drug related. I will say over this past year, though, our numbers of drug related incidents have been more on the lower end than they have been in years past. And I will also note that I think for the most part, when we look at our gang related activity, as it relates to aggravated assaults and homicides, they are also on the lower level. I will applaud the county council in years past that have provided us with additional support for gang officers. We changed, again, the paradigm of how we added more resources to address our gang issues in the county and from an investigative standpoint. And that has proven to be very fruitful as we are starting to see really, particularly some of the more gangs known to all of us and more popular, such as MS-13 and some of the others that have been really causing a terror on our communities over the years past. But we have started to see where those types of incidents have been more on the decline and they've been on an increase. And I think it's because we're focusing on really targeting those organizations and taking the individuals who are really responsible for some of the most heinous crimes in our county and taking them off of our streets, and working with places like, U.S. Attorney's Office, as well as other agencies that help us with that. So again, that's something that we're proud to see that be a drop in, and hopefully we'll be able to maintain that as we continue to focus. And I can promise you that our gang investigators are very much engaged in incidents that occur across the county, working with other investigators to make sure that individuals that might, if there is a gang relation, to make sure that to find out whether it's been motivated by gang activity or simply just because the individual is a gang member.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call on Carrie for your last question, and then it's going back to Alan for the final question. That'll be all the questions we take. So Carrie, go ahead.
Chief Jones, just a comment here. I wouldn't want you to confuse these people who are burning their tires and doing the 360s with the car enthusiasts, classic car enthusiasts that show their cars on Sunday, because I own two. I own a 69 Camaro and a 69 Chevelle. Right. And we're not, the people you're dealing with that are doing those burnouts, they're called tuners. And that's what they do, is they tune their automobiles to be able to get maximum horsepower. And they're demonstrating that with these it's horrible. The classic car enthusiasts, they were kicked out of a shopping center in Burtonsville because of these tuners. Right. And there's no relationship. So I just wanted you to know that.
I appreciate that, Mr. Lamar. And I will tell you that I've had that very conversation with others to make sure that they understand that, and I understood that there is a differentiation between the two groups, that we knew that there were always car groups that existed before these individuals started doing what they were doing. Because I always knew about the Corvette clubs and, exactly. The Camaros, as you noted. So yes, we know that there's a difference, and we know that these individuals,
it's a business for them. These tuners, the more 360s they can do, the more rubber tires they can burn up. Believe me, they're selling their services to other people that want to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
It's
absolutely
crazy.
Yes, it is. So thank you for that.
Okay, back to Alan.
Thank you, Jackie. Chief, a couple of questions, and we can conclude by 9. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Very valuable. I think people have been asking very thoughtful questions. I know that one of your passions, one of the things that you really care about is engaging the community. And I know that you had some thoughts about police athletic leagues and after-school programs. I don't know if we still have the county executive and council member Hucker, but as we enter budget season, I'm wondering if you can talk about the importance of these after-school programs to help you do your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when we look at our, for example, we have, we no longer have the SRO program, but we have community engagement officers who still work around our schools. And all of those officers are DARE certified. And I know many people remember DARE probably from like the late 80s into the early 90s as really about a drug program, but DARE has expanded into so many different avenues that also deal with bullying, dealing with really making good choices. And it's not just an elementary school program anymore. It actually is a middle school and a high school program. And all of my officers who were in the SRO program were actually have been certified in DARE. And I've talked to Dr. McKnight about engaging those officers in the schools in which they work in, both elementary, middle, or I should say all three categories of our schools, in order to make sure that they can utilize their skills, but also to benefit the kids. And you're spot on, Alan. I solely believe in the police athletic league concept. Working with many of our students, particularly in some of the most troubled areas that we have. We've had success with that program in years past. We did it in a Good Hope community. We did it in the Gaithersburg community. In fact, I was at an event just around late 2019, before we went into COVID, and I was sitting next to a young man in the Sikh community at a Sikh temple, breaking bread with him after a service. And he looked at me and he said, Chief Jones, he said, I actually was a PAL student and I lived in Good Hope. And he says, I remember Officer Jones, and he says, I remember Officer Gloucester. And I informed him that Officer Gloucester was still on the job. And I also told him, and he didn't even know it, but I told him that the Officer Jones that he was talking about was my brother. And how he talked about how that had a positive impact on his life. Stories that really, the testimonies that we really need to tell, that police officers have that positive outlook. I would love for us to be able to bring that program back to Montgomery County. I think there is a need for it. It does help with community police relationships. And I think if that was supported, I think we go a long way to really, again, looking at positive outcomes of policing and not always looking at the negative. So I would love to see that from a community engagement standpoint.
We've had several opportunities to work with Commander McBain and his 4 lieutenants, including his new Lieutenant Tanisha Jensen, if I remember that's her name correctly.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And Lieutenant Enstrom was talking about visibility and making the police more visible, I guess, in the Henry sector of the district.
Mm-hmm.
And I was suggested to Commander McBain that we'd like more visibility in East Silver Spring.
Okay.
A couple of neighbors would like to be able to go to downtown Silver Spring and see a police presence, and many of them do not.
Right.
She says that, Lisa said that some of your officers drive through the Henry sector with the blue lights on the car. That's seen in DC and other parts of the country. I know that somebody would like to see a police car at the intersection of Ellsworth and Fenton Street. And
yes,
we remember that car being there for a long time. Somebody said it was only there for when officers were writing reports, but we think it would add a lot to the security and the comfort zone for residents if there was a visible police presence downtown near Veterans Plaza and at Ellsworth and Fenton Street. So I commend that to your attention and see if you can do anything about that. The last thing I would ask you is we're having a community debate on long-term development. We call it Thrive 2050. It was planned before the county council. One of the focus of that conversation has been on housing. And I'm wondering to what extent the lack of affordable housing, workforce housing, is having on your officers and their morale. And has it ever come up in your conversations with your command staff and the county council about doing something to help police officers live in Montgomery County? Commander McBain said some of his officers live in Gettysburg and Harper's Ferry, and they have to commute many hours a day. And it seems very problematic. We're never going to get to a paradigm of community policing if people are leaving the community every day.
Right. I think affordable housing has been an issue for this police department for quite some time. I do know that the council, there is some legislation that's being proposed about providing a tax break for home ownership for our police officers, as well as our other public safety partners. I think that would be that's long overdue. I think it will be beneficial. I think police officers absolutely want to live here in Montgomery County, but I think there are some significant challenges based upon their salaries and the like, in order for affordability in some of our areas. So it's something, again, that I think it is important for us to have that conversation. I would like us that there be more opportunities of affordable housing for our officers, in order to allow them to be a part of our communities in which they serve. We've done sort of fragmented programs along the way in some years, and some apartment complexes do provide some of that to our officers and throughout. But again, that can sometimes only be sort of a temporary fix. I think when you're looking for home ownership that gives you a longer stability, that our officers who have young families, and I can, remember even when I first came on in the early 80s, the mid 80s, as I was growing a young family into the early 90s, that my wife and I often talk about the lack of affordable housing in certain parts of Montgomery County, and how we at times talked about moving to another county. But, we were able to, figure out a way to stay within the county. All three of our kids were raised here, and two of my kids still live in the county. But they're young people, but it's still a challenge for them from an affordability standpoint. So just, again, I think, that for us to keep that on the back of our minds as we're trying to recruit people here, we want them to be a part of the county. I think it really does grow better relationships over time when you have that.
Thank you very much, Chief. Somebody's asked in the chat, how do they contact you? Can you give them an email address?
Sure. I'm going to type it into the chat if I can get my computer working here in a second.
So I want to thank you, Chief, for spending so much time with us on a Monday evening. We always appreciate your willing to participate with the Civic Fed. We enjoyed your engagement when you were the 3rd District Commander, and we're glad to see that you're continuing this effort of reaching out to us as the Chief of Police. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my honor, my pleasure. Thank you all so much. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all again next year, and hopefully in person, which I hopefully will be able to do. So thank you. We
hope so.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you so much, Chief.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Take care.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. Good night.
Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for hanging with us so far. It's a little bit after 9. We would like to do some brief Civic Federation business and catch up on a couple of things which are on our plate. Liz Joyce, are you in a position to talk to us a little bit about the Thrive 2050 and where we are in that process? When you unmute.
Yes, of course. Actually, where we are on Thrive 2050 is a mystery to all, as far as we know. What we do know is that the civic activism that has taken place and that we have been a big part of, has, I believe, slowed the process. Had it not been for the kind of activism that we have been involved in, it probably would have been passed a few months ago. And right now it's probably going to go into the next year. And our goal, as we have stated so many times, is for it to address many concerns that we have put into our resolutions. And we don't know how the council is going to respond to that, because unfortunately there has been minimal response from the council members to the various activist groups, as far as I can tell. And please correct me if I'm wrong. But last night we had a wonderful alternative opportunity for people who were not able to participate in the county council's listening sessions to present their views. And we had many people. I don't know what the number is, but I know we had about 100 people on the call, and we had many people testify. And today, I don't know if I was successful, but I took the link from our event and sent it to the county council as testimony. And I'm hoping that it will be part of the official record, because that would mean that we're on the radar screen. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that it's been slowed down. And we do know that people are raising some solid concerns about what we perceive to be the very serious weaknesses and flaws in the program and in the legislation, and the issues that we think need to be addressed before any consideration should be given to it. But we haven't had enough feedback. We don't know what's going to happen, but we do know that things are slowing down to some extent.
Thank you, Liz. We do know that a draft text has been reported out of the Fed committee to the full council.
Right.
And that the current council is having listening sessions. They had one last week, and they'll have one this week.
Yes, the 15th.
I think somebody said it was changed to the 14th, but
okay, the 14th. Okay.
It is very confusing, but we have confidence in. We've got good signals from the new council president, Gabe Albernas, about their deliberation about the Thrive plan. So, stay tuned. Doesn't look like anything will happen before Christmas and New Year's. So it's definitely something for the new year. And it didn't look like that a few months ago. So thank you for that report. For our members, we will continue to report on the progress with Thrive, and we will continue to weigh in as appropriate. Jerry, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the attainable housing strategies. There was a session that began at 7 o'clock tonight that I watched part of, and it's getting worse. They now have a new proposal of small scale, they're calling a house scale, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, accessory dwelling units, 2 to 2.5 stories. Then they have a medium scale stacked flats, small apartment buildings, 3 stories, townhouses, 3 to 4 stories high. Then they have what they call large scale mixed use live work buildings, stacked flats, small apartment buildings, 4 stories, 4 to 5 stories high. They keep expanding this on what they want to put in all the neighborhoods. This is just tonight's proposal. Their session began at 7 o'clock, ended at 8:40, and they had very few questions that they were willing to answer. One of the questions I'd asked them about the cost of building in the ag reserve, which is say $30,000 an acre or even a lot less, compared with $2 to $3 million and thing. And Glenn Wright said, well, we need this for food production. But then I asked the question back, which the moderator just answered, oh, well, there are dozens of farms that produce food for human consumption. Well, we have thousands of homes here, but there are only dozens of farms, and we have to protect the ag reserve for these dozens of farms. And Glenn Wright offered to take me on a tour. I'm going to try to take a tour and see how many real farms that produce real food for human consumption. All my experience is that very few humans eat animal corn. Very few humans eat soybeans. Very few humans eat sod. Maybe even no humans eat this stuff, but I'm not quite sure. And I'll keep you guys posted on that. I'll give a transportation report later on when you get to committee reports. But it seems that their proposals keep getting worse and worse. And I think the developers have some ideas of building 5-story apartment houses throughout the county. And it's just getting worse and worse because no matter what they do, the economics don't seem to match out.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. I see that, Carrie, you've raised your hand. Is it on this issue?
Yes, it is. And I just wanted to say something else. On the other day, the planning board and staff had a work session. And I think that this is appropriate for the Federation. A lot of homeowners associations, right, are of the opinion, well, they can legally, prevent Thrive or attainable housing from being utilized in their homeowners associations through covenants. Well, the planning board is making a recommendation to the county council that they get the General Assembly, or at least the Montgomery County delegation, to change the law on that and make it like solar panels, where people within homeowners associations, will be able to build attainable housing if they choose to, and covenants will not prevent it. They also mentioned about, and this was cryptic, they wanted to suggest that in floating zones within 500 feet, I believe, from corridors, they were going to encourage attainable housing as well. I was a little confused about that because that's too broad to suggest floating zones, because there's a lot of zones within the floating zones, floating zone category. So anyway, they are changing it. It is being modified almost daily. There you go.
Thank you, Carrie. Sharon Campbell, you have a question or a comment?
I guess it's a question, but I think this group might be able to answer it for me if anybody can. Is I still have no true idea of what attainable housing means, because in my read of things, they have taken out the terminology affordable housing, essentially, from Thrive, and are using the term attainable. From a Town of Kensington meeting that I listened to, they seem to think that it meant if a house would sell for, regular market pricing for, say, $500,000 or $1 million, whatever, then attainable housing would be anything less than that. So I don't even know what a planning board is talking about. Thank you.
I think Liz Joyce wants to comment on that. Liz?
Yes, this is part of the ever escalating rebranding. Let me use a diplomatic term that they have used. Here's what happened. They started with the idea that they wanted more missing middle housing in the county. And in the end of last year, they did a marketing study in Silver Spring. And they were talking at that point about affordable housing. When the marketing study came out in March of 2021, it was clear that even the builders didn't want to build duplexes, probably not triplexes, probably going to be townhouses would be the minimum that they would want to build, and that they would start at $715,000 in Silver Spring, which is one of the more affordable areas. So at that point, and this is crucial, at that point they realized that these units were not going to be affordable. So they come up with a new strategy to call it Attainable. Well, there is an industry standard for what attainable housing is, and it has attached to it is a certain average medium income. But for the Montgomery County definition of attainable, they stripped out the average median income. So attainable means basically anything they want it to mean. And this is part of what most people would consider a questionable set of messaging and concepts. And as Carrie just said, what they're proposing changes every single day. They've had 60 people working on this for months. And it is a fascinatingly concerning set of strategies that they're doing. But to answer your questions, attainable means that it's not affordable according to any industry standard of affordable, and that they're using this different term, which is meaningless here. It means it's not affordable, and who knows what it means. But that what they want to do is, as Jerry just said, is provide the developers with whatever opportunities they want to build multifamily units wherever they want in the county. And this is very problematic because, as Carrie pointed out last night, they already have enough units in the pipeline to provide housing for all the people that the supposed strategies that this strategy is supposed to deal with. So it's a very confusing set of messaging, and it is for those who worry about the good faith of the planning board, it is cause for concern.
Thank you, Liz. Sharon, I'm going to address your question this way. I'm going to direct you to the planning department's website on Thrive 2050 and Attainable Housing and their Attainable Housing Study, where the current definitions are. That's the best way to get a handle on all the different terms and the different proposals that are being presented for downtown Silver Spring and adjacent communities, as well as the Attainable Housing Study that's was being discussed by the planning board staff today. You illustrated very clearly that this is a complicated issue, and many people are confused about it. I believe council members are confused about it. Surely our neighbors are confused about it, and that's what sort of added to the intensity of the conversation. We've got a couple of people who want to speak, and we're going to take Alan Myers first.
I was going to yield to the county executive first, if you want, Alan.
Oh, I was going to let you go first, but county executive, would you like to talk to our group? And thank you for being here, county executive. Mark?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I just wanted, again, thank you for doing this. I just wanted to point out, because I talked about a lot of stuff last night, but I just wanted to get into this missing middle thing, because you've heard this discussion about, oh, they want to do 3-story buildings, 4-story buildings. So ask yourself what parking planning did in the zoning of Bethesda. What did the planning department do? They took the 3-story brownstone apartments on Bradley and on, what's the other B word up there? I say one and then I automatically forget the other, Battery. They actually rezoned those properties for higher densities. So here's a place at the edge of the urban area, on Battery on the north side and Bradley on the south side, where you had these lower density apartments transitioning into the neighborhoods, and they zoned those for much higher densities. So here, where they actually have naturally occurring what you'd call missing middle housing, they're obliterating missing middle housing. I mean, it's really hard to lose the hypocrisy in what they're doing, but I think it's worth, a picture is worth 1,000 words. It would be worth it to take pictures of things like this and say, so here's missing middle, and it's okay to eliminate it when it suits the developers who want higher density here, but it's okay to plop it into any place they want to. The other thing I'd say is that putting that kind of density along these corridors, particularly this notion of where they want to go along the corridors, means that nobody's going to work there. they're all going to have to become commuters, which would be way different than if the same density was allowed to build out in the places where it was planned. You know, I know Carrie knows this, but you guys cannot repeat this enough, that the county's zone for all the growth that's projected to come here, and changing the zoning will not make housing get built. We are able to build the housing. We don't have a shortage of places to put the housing. What we have is a market that isn't able to provide housing at the prices developers want for the housing. Mm-hmm. And going into the neighborhoods and if you were to go into Bethesda and take $1 million house and then put, $3 million townhouses on there, you're not doing anything to deal with the supply issues or the affordable issues in the county. But I just want you all to think about Battery and Bradley every time you listen to them talk about the importance of missing middle as they dutifully try to wipe it off the map. That's all.
Thank you, County Executive. I think one of the points that I remember and I share with people when I get a chance is that we want affordable housing, but it's going to have to be intentional. It's going to require large subsidies, and that for the people who they're expecting to move into the county over the next 50 years, some of them are going to be making less than $100,000. And if we want housing for working families, it's going to have to be highly subsidized, income restricted, and it's going to be intentional because it doesn't seem to be profitable for builders to do affordable housing. Alan, do you want to ask your question?
I changed my mind. Something about that.
Wait, excuse me. Go ahead, Mark, and then Alan.
Yeah. So let me give you a slightly different take on this notion of affordability. If a person had a piece of land that had, say, like a relatively low zoning on it, and you asked somebody to increase the affordability but didn't increase their density, you might have an issue with whether or not you can ask the developer to do that. But just remember, when you're talking about Bethesda, Silver Spring, White Flint 1, White Flint 2, you're taking properties that had very, very low zoning. And we have added massive amounts of density to it. The FARs that we've allowed under our master plans are really big compared to what was on the ground prior to the new master plans. And we don't count the value that we're giving them by increasing the zoning. So everything gets reduced to, well, these new units, are less than the market units. We can only afford to give you so many. They totally discount the additional profits and what they make from the higher zoning that they've been given. And so I'm not sure that we should totally look at this as something that taxpayers totally have to subsidize. I think it's fair to ask the development community in exchange for the increased density that we actually get increases in the amount of affordability we need. It's never going to be extreme, but the idea that we shouldn't ask for more given what we're giving them in terms of increased value by increasing their density, I don't think we should ignore that possibility.
Okay, we won't ignore that possibility, and more conversations about this. Alan, please.
Yeah, instead of a question, I'll make a statement that, in following up what Mark mentioned, since I live in Bethesda, if anybody's going to be testifying or would like to submit pictures, I'll be happy to take them of both of those places. I know them well. My grandmother actually lived in one of the apartments on Bradley Boulevard many, many, many years ago, and the Battery Lane apartments are just hop, skip, and a jump up the street from me.
Thank you, Alan. Jerry, quick comment or question?
The thing is that they've now raised the attainable housing to be $850,000. Every couple of months, they keep raising the minimum cost. And basically townhouses, you're lucky to build a townhouse with land prices the way they are for $1 million. They're probably about 1.2 million, 1.3 million. The only place you could build affordable housing is in the ag reserve. And I know that's off limits, but that's the only place land can be bought for like $30,000 an acre. If you're going to spend $2 to $3 million an acre, there's no way you could build affordable housing, either 1 family, 2 family, 3 family, 4 family, 5 family, or 100 families. And basically, that's why they've changed the words to attainable housing. That means if you're making $200,000, you could buy a house in Montgomery County. They're basically almost eliminating anyone of any reasonable means to either buy a co-op or condo or a house or a piece of a quadplex. In fact, in my neighborhood, the people said if I sold my single family detached home and wanted to buy a quadplex, I'd have to probably put another $100,000 to $200,000 in. This is not affordable housing in any way to most people. It's affordable to people making over $200,000, preferably over $300,000 a year.
Thank you, Jerry. Carrie, a short comment or?
Real short here. Jerry, I love you, bro, but you're wrong. We have been advocates for community land trusts for the past decade, all right? This, using multiplex housing, it's the perfect segue into creating community land trust housing. We could, if we targeted upzoning using master plans and identified CLT locations, we could sell one market rate for every 3 CLT units. So you buy a property, of the 4, 1 is market rate, 3 would be affordable CLT. That 1 market rate would pay for the purchase price of the land, and you could build 3 bricks and sticks community land trust housing for first-time home buyers. Why we aren't doing that, why we aren't considering that is just beyond my imagination. Because that could be an opportunity. Anyway,
if you want to write something, if you want to write something up on that,
I wrote it when I ran for county council back in 2010.
Well, this is 2020. It's 2021, Carrie.
Yeah, it should have been done.
If you'd like to do it again, we would love to
All right,
see it.
I'll do that, Alan.
Well, thank you, Liz, for giving us an update on where we are with Attainable Housing Study and the Thrive 2050 document. Obviously, this group is very interested in these subjects, and there will be more. It's already 9:25. Just let's quickly, go through our committee subjects and see if anybody has anything to announce to the group. I would just preface this discussion by saying we are anxious to find people to be chairs, co-chairs, and members of our civic fed committees. Asking those of you who are leaders in your civic associations and your homeowner associations to think about who who could help us do this work. Because right now this work is done by a precious few group of people, and it's more difficult than it should be. I've asked our new first vice president, Joshua Montgomery, to develop a roster of people who can be chairs of our committees: education, environment, land use and planning, legislation, public finance, public safety, and transportation. Might have missed one there, but we need more people. And we would love for you to make some suggestions about people from your associations and your neighborhoods who you think would be good doing this kind of work. I'm just going to go through the list, the alphabetical list of our committees. And if anybody has anything they'd like to say about these particular issues, we would entertain that now. So the first one is education. Anybody have anything to say about education that we need to know? Would be good to know. Okay, not seeing anybody indicate they want to talk about education and the environment. Anybody want to weigh in on environment? I would just mention that the Audubon Natural Society, which is going to change its word because Mr. Audubon has a questionable history of racial segregation. They're going to change the name. It's not going to be called the Audubon Society anymore. It's going to be called something else. We don't know what. But ANS is working very hard on stormwater issues, and they have a sort of county-wide working group that's taking up these issues. There are some people in the county, some of our friends, Amanda Farber, Gene Kavanaugh, who are working to develop a section on green infrastructure that they're going to recommend to the county council include in the Thrive concept document. There is precious little about green infrastructure, and they would like to offer up some information to the county council and see if they'll adopt it into the new document. Land use and planning. Her head is gone, but Liz Joyce has agreed to be our acting chair of the Land Use and Planning Committee. She's done great work, as you know, written some great articles that helped our partners in EPIC and the Montgomery County Taxpayers League. So Liz will be honchoing the land use and planning portfolio until we can get her some help. Legislation, I don't see Peggy Dennis on the call. We're interested in receiving suggestions about what bills that we can support in the upcoming session of the General Assembly. One of the bills that seems to be talked about a lot is a bill similar to what they just passed in New York State, which would put limits on modified exhaust systems, modified mufflers on the shops and on the people who get their cars modified. Because it is an issue which seems to be out of control in Montgomery County. Public finance, anybody want to say anything about public finance? Don't raise your hands raise your hands at the same time. Public safety, I think we had a good conversation tonight with the chief. Well, I think the chief is great when he has these kinds of meetings with the community. I hope you agree. And then last but not least, transportation. Jerry, did you have something you wanted to say on transportation?
Yeah, I have something. I have 2 or 3 things on transportation. One is I recently took a small tour of my neighborhood and reported 6 streetlights that were out. Pepco has fixed 2 of them as of now, and the others, they say they're complete in the next week or 2. And if anyone has any streetlights out, just report them to Pepco, go onto their website, click at the location where it is, and they'll show you what house it's in front of, and they'll then fix them normally within about 2 weeks. If you have, these are on poles that are owned by Pepco. If they're on metal things, you have to report them to 311. If they're on state highways, you have to report them to the State Highway Administration. We've also seen that there still seem to be more delays on the Purple Line, and they're now asking for this for more money to actually compensate some of the people's businesses that have been delayed from all the delays in the Purple Line. The current timetable is sometime in 2026 that the Purple Line will be complete. If there are any other questions, just contact me on transportation. I'll try to help anyone.
Thank you, Jerry. Alan Myers, do you have a question?
Not a question, just a statement. Are we the only group that got that has residential permanent parking that got the survey from MCDOT, or did any of you else get it?
I did not see it over here in East Silver Spring. Because
they're sending it out to everybody who has permits, asking them to give a star rating to the contractor on services and stuff. Surprised they may have sent it out to us. I don't know. I was reading behind the lines thinking that maybe if they got bad enough ratings, they'd find a reason to get rid of the contractor.
Squeaky wheels, you know.
Too much squeaking over here, but it seems to be getting some results.
Thank you, Alan. We've come to the end of our committee reports. Anybody have anything they'd like the Federation to take up in the weeks and months ahead? I thought that we'd have a conversation about redistricting. As you know, the County Council has approved a new redistricting map in Montgomery County. And some of us are not in the same districts we were just a few days ago. I live over here by Wayne Avenue, Dale Drive by the old Blair, and that used to be District 5, now appears to be District 4, with a new district that goes from Tacoma Park, Silver Spring, Kensington to North Bethesda. North Bethesda people are not very happy about that. There are 2 new districts. We put some information in our newsletter, in the in the December newsletter with some maps. And of course, you can always Google and go online to the county's website, and you can see interactive redistricting maps where you can drill down to your neighborhood and see if your situation has changed. If there's anybody have anything else they want to say? Then seeing no hands raised, I entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is it seconded?
Seconded.
Moved and second. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll see you in January.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Happy New Year.